Dan Goldman just obliterated Marjorie Taylor Greene in a hearing so chaotic it looked more like a circus than Congress. Greene stormed in with wild numbers, dramatic accusations, and fiery claims about the border crisis, thinking she had the perfect stage to attack Secretary Mayorkas. But what she didn't expect was Goldman turning her performance into a cell phone on live TV. In a few sharp lines, he exposed the hypocrisy, shredded the so-called evidence, and left Greene with nothing but silence. And the way he did it stunned everyone watching. Greene began her 5 minutes with a fiery declaration calling the impeachment of Donald Trump a sham while insisting this time it was different.
Just because a member of Congress from Georgia says you are, there actually has to be evidence provided to support that. That's how our country works. That's how due process works. That's how the rule of law works. Is the president doesn't get to determine that someone is or is not a terrorist. Members of Congress don't get to determine whether someone is or is not a terrorist. But that does not seem to be something that some of my colleagues understand. There's a reason why we have due process in this country, and you may think that due process is not warranted for someone who is not a citizen of this country, or you may think that due process is not warranted for someone who's accused of being a member of a Venezuelan gang or terrorist organization. But once you start going down that slippery slope, then our basic foundations of due process come undone entirely. And I don't understand what the problem is with allowing a neutral arbiter based on evidence to determine whether someone is a terrorist or not. What is the objection that this administration has to presenting evidence to a judge to say, this is the evidence that this person is a member of a particular cartel? What we've seen in one particular case that is top of mind right now is that there's a confidential informant who has said that someone was a member of a foreign gang, a foreign terrorist organization now designated, and that he wore a particular type of baseball hat. There's no corroboration. There's nothing else to corroborate or to confirm what that confidential informant says, at least that has been presented. And I know there are some lawyers on the other side, some former prosecutors on the other side of the aisle who, like me, would never, ever present to a judge a non-corroborated statement from a confidential informant as the basis for establishing anything. And so we're a little off topic, but I did feel I need to address my colleague from Georgia's comments about all of the alleged terrorists who are there are those who are supporting them to stay in. Nobody is supporting any member of a foreign gang to stay in here. We would just like to make sure that people are adjudicated and determined to be a member of a foreign gang by someone other than the President of the United States or a member of Congress. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Guest for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would like to yield as much of my time as she may consume to Ms. Greene.
Thank you.
Ladies recognized.
Thank you. I think my colleague across the aisle is very confused and maybe uneducated and uninformed of what a special interest alien is. SIA is a non-U.S. person who is based on an analysis of travel patterns, potentially poses a national security risk to the United States or its interest. Special interest aliens are people from countries identified by the United States government as having conditions that promote or protect terrorism or potentially pose some sort of national security threat to the United States. It's hard for me to fathom that anyone on this committee would be opposed to simply reporting the number of special interest aliens that Homeland, that are great men and women that served as Border Patrol agents, that any of our police, any of our ICE agents happen to detain, and it's just the number. We're just telling the American people how many. That's it.
Would the gentlelady yield for a
No, I
question?
will not yield. The Department of Homeland Security officials have publicly posted information about special interest aliens in the past, including the current Border Patrol chief and his predecessor. Custom and Border Protection already published similar numbers on its public site. For example, the terrorist screening data set. And just to go further, and this is always an interesting dynamic to me. On our side of the aisle, we trust the American people, and we believe they deserve transparency. They deserved the truth from the federal government, because it is, after all, that we swore an oath to serve the American people. And the American people are the taxpayers that pay all of our paychecks. They pay for this building. They fund this government, even though the government has plunged them into $36 trillion in debt and opened up the borders for the past 4 years and allowed it to be flooded with illegal aliens. And then the Biden administration gave them Social Security numbers. You see, this that we are trying to pass today, and we would love to have your participation. We would enjoy and really would thank you for caring about transparency and providing information to the American people.
This time it was real. Her voice carried that familiar defiance as she rattled off claim after claim about Secretary Mayorkas supposedly lying to Congress and the American people about the border being secure. She repeated his words, "The border is secure, the border is closed," with a mocking tone, as if saying them enough times would prove her point. For Greene, this wasn't about measured debate, it was about building a spectacle, and she leaned into it fully. From there she escalated into statistics meant to shock the room. She declared that 10 million migrants had crossed since Biden took office, adding the chilling figure of 1.8 million gotaways who supposedly slipped through undetected. She pointed to September 2023 as a record-breaking month with over 341,000 crossings, painting a picture of chaos and invasion. She brought up special interest aliens and implied terrorists could be hiding among them. Her words weren't crafted to inform, they were designed to alarm, to trigger headlines, and to hammer home her narrative of crisis. For a few moments she had the stage entirely to herself. But Greene wasn't done. She moved from numbers to legal claims, accusing Mayorkas of violating the Secure Fence Act of 2006, accusing him of breaking the Immigration and Nationality Act by implementing so-called catch-and-release policies, and even invoking the Constitution itself. With each new accusation she layered on, Greene tried to make the case that Mayorkas wasn't just failing, he was breaking the law and betraying the American people. To her supporters it sounded like a slam-dunk case for impeachment. To everyone else it sounded like political theater dressed up as outrage. And then came Goldman's turn. His tone was calm but cutting, and in an instant he shifted the mood in the room. He called out the personal slander aimed at Mayorkas, reminding everyone of the man's decades of public service. Goldman emphasized Mayorkas's background as a U.S. attorney, his multiple roles in Homeland Security, and most importantly his story as an immigrant from a Cuban family that fled difficult circumstances. In that moment, Goldman reframed the narrative not as Greene's tale of failure but as an attack on someone who had dedicated his life to this country. He told Greene and her allies directly, "You should be ashamed of yourselves." Goldman then ripped the curtain back on the entire proceeding. He called it exactly what it was, a charade, the same hearing replayed again and again, same pig, different lipstick. He noted that the so-called impeachment witnesses weren't even experts in impeachment law. They were Republican attorneys general from states that didn't border Mexico, brought in simply to parrot partisan lines. Goldman reminded the room that the last time Republicans tried this stunt, their own experts admitted there wasn't sufficient evidence to impeach President Biden. And here they were again, replaying the same tired show under a new label. But Goldman didn't stop there. He went straight at the hypocrisy. He laid out example after example of Republicans suing Mayorkas to block the very policies that could reduce border pressure. The asylum processing rule, designed to speed up cases and shrink the backlog, Republicans sued to stop it. The asylum circumvention rule, requiring migrants to first seek asylum in a neighboring country, again Republicans sued to stop it. parole programs that let migrants work legally instead of draining public resources. Republicans blocked those too. Goldman's argument was devastatingly simple: you can't block every solution and then accuse someone of doing nothing. As he built his case, Goldman's words carried the weight of logic that Greene's theatrics couldn't match. He cornered Republicans into their contradiction. They say Mayorkas fails to enforce the law, but they fight him in court every time he tries to enforce stricter rules. They claim he's doing nothing, but when he acts, they block him. With his final line, Goldman delivered the knockout: which do you want? It wasn't just a question to Greene, it was a question to the entire Republican caucus, and it hung in the air unanswered. The exchange went far beyond a personal spat. It revealed the deeper divide in Washington, one side playing to the cameras with emotional soundbites, the other exposing the contradictions with cold, clear facts. Greene's performance may have riled her base, but Goldman's rebuttal resonated with anyone watching for substance. He cut through the noise to show how much of the so-called impeachment drive is about politics, not policy. And that's the bigger story. This wasn't just Goldman versus Greene, it was a snapshot of how America's immigration debate is being staged in Congress. While real bipartisan talks are happening in the Senate, Greene and her allies are putting on hearings designed to inflame rather than solve. Goldman pulled the mask off, reminding viewers that if the goal is to actually fix problems, this isn't the way. What happened in that hearing wasn't about finding solutions, it was about scoring points. When Goldman turned Greene's accusations back on her, the message was clear: you can play politics or you can solve problems, but you can't pretend to do both. It was a mic drop moment that left Greene without a response and the rest of the room buzzing. And for everyone watching, it was a reminder that sometimes the loudest voices in Congress get humbled by a few sharp truths. So if you want more breakdowns of these explosive moments that cut through the chaos and reveal what's really happening, make sure you stick around, because what's coming next is going to be even bigger.